Rise Nation, an organization with seemingly no success in Call of Duty up until this point. It's been pretty surprising to see how many rosters this organization has, how many players it's accrued over the course of its existence, and hasn't achieved 1 ounce of success in terms of winning a championship. Obviously, it's a well-known organization. Teams and players constantly flock towards it, but they've never really had star players, and even right now, they don't have all these star players in terms of their names and just straight up their star power. Like, these players haven't been around for so long to where you just want them because of the legacy factor that they could bring potentially from their fan base, or just the sheer fact that they are god players in their positions. No one really considers any of these players good, at least before this tournament. And now Rise Nation, a team with no aspirations at all, coming out, from Advanced Warfare, constant poor performances in terms of not being able to place it within the top 4 consistently, having good rosters, having star players, having that dynamic that makes an organization as successful as organizations such as, FaZe Clan or Optic Gaming, Complexity, TK, all these rosters envious. I can just keep listing them off. And Elevate, Denial. I mean, all these rosters have had star players in many of their positions, have had wild success in terms of their social media growth and their YouTube side and their streaming platforms, and also when they actually attend LAN events, they're selling merchandise. People are coming to see them based on the personalities on their team. They're actually becoming successful by winning LANs in most of the cases that I mentioned here on this list. And then you look at Rise Nation, and they almost fit none of those criteria, right? Like, okay, you'll have the occasional Rise fan, and that's all great, fine, and dandy, but now, since they won the Totino's Invitational, 50K total prize pool, I believe first place took 20K, so massive, payout towards the 4 guys on that team. And now, since they've actually won something, people are, they act like it's, sort of surprising that Rise won. Historically, yes, it is extremely surprising. The Rise organization has never had that massive success, so it doesn't really fit the whole agenda of, like, following trends and patterns. It should have been an Optic Gaming FaZe Clan Grand Finals again, because that's what happened throughout the duration of Advanced Warfare, where you had these top players in Clayster playing against Scump and his teammates, and you have these rivalries that go back and forth for the entire season. Rise Nation comes out of the woodwork and just takes first. It makes no sense to a lot of people, but that's really looking at it naively in a sense, because there's so many factors up in the air even going into this event that it's almost impossible to have predicted this one going into Rise's favor, regardless of how it would have turned out. And I believe it could have turned out any number of ways. Any of the 8 teams at this event could have won it. And you're just saying, hey, Nuxter, you're probably just saying that because you've already seen the results of the event. You already know that Rise won. So you're just making this video to justify the fact that you may have thought another team would have won. And I agree. I would have thought a team like Optic Gaming or FaZe Clan or even Complexity had a better chance at winning this event than Rise. They had a better chance, but every single team had a possibility. And also, you can say that in the worst case scenario in every single event, COD Champs, you could have had a team with Deloshi. That team could have won. It's very possible, not probable, but possible. In any scenario, however it breaks down, a team could make it to the event. The other team lost 3 of their players, so it's a 1v4. Any number of scenarios are possible to make something exist. There's always a timeline in which it's possible. So at this event, I think there were more timelines available, if that makes sense, where all of the teams could have won here. So just to list a few of the reasons why I believe all the teams could have won here, I'll just go on based on the fact that this game, Black Ops 3, it's a new game, guys. We've only had it for about 2 weeks max. Some players may have gotten it a little early based on if they did some shady dealings in the backyard. Maybe they did some favors, did some little questionable deeds to play a video game that was formerly $60 they could have just downloaded from Xbox Live, or PSN Live, whatever you use. I don't even know if it's called PSN Live actually, but don't quote me on that. But they probably just get the game anyways. These guys are pro players. They need the game as fast as possible, and so they only have this limited amount of time to learn so much about the game that's so entirely different in terms of the competitive nature of the game from the past Call of Duty iterations. People are saying, it's close to Black Ops 2, and it is in terms of the way it feels. The movement's obviously different, but there's a feel to it that brings that Treyarch nostalgia back towards you. The time to kill is sort of, memorable in terms of how people perceived Black Ops 2. Games like, Call of Duty Ghost and Advanced Warfare had completely different, play styles as well. And so Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3 seem to mesh really well, but there's also massive differences in terms of the actual mechanics that are brought in game. So alongside the movement, the actual in-game mechanics, players have to adapt to that. Coming off Advanced Warfare, you have some of the jetpackers, they call them now, that have fallen off entirely and that aren't capable of playing anymore because they just constantly spam the boost and the jumps, and that's how they won gunfights, by the sheer element of randomness, as I'll put that in quotations right there. So you have a massive difference in the actual in-game changes. So there's, people always like to put in the idea that Call of Duty is always the same, and in a sense, you're always playing the same game. I have, as a player myself, I never really fallen off in a sense. I've always been very strong. Even in this game, I'm pulling, a 2.5 KD pretty consistently in pubs, and then in my competitive GB matches that I like to play here and then, I'm usually carrying from the AR position. So even myself, and I don't want to just toot my own horn, I know a lot of the friends that I have are also very consistent players. If you master one Call of Duty, you can apply a lot of the information and a lot of the strategy that you used in that Call of Duty to the other CODs, right? So there's a lot of transferability in terms of skill, in terms of knowledge. In competitive, there's a lot more nuances, though, that can be transferred. For instance, in Advanced Warfare, a lot of those nuances have to do with movement and in terms of the gunfights that you're doing. Also, in terms of the maps, the game modes that you're playing. In Black Ops 3, there's going to be a completely different way you can use movement now, the way you maneuver maps, spawns. That's a huge issue right now. People don't understand spawns as well as maybe they'd like, and also I'd like to understand spawns more, because the maps are different. They're completely different games, guys. I mean, it's like you can say, like I said earlier, just a second ago, that Call of Duty is the same year in, year out. Always the same cycle. People enjoy it a lot at the very beginning of the game cycle. Towards the end, or towards even the middle, starting to become closer and closer, the lifespan starts to decrease, but people start to become frustrated, and they understand the game too well to a point where if you're not having perfect success, perfect outcomes, people just aren't going to enjoy it any other way. So Call of Duty is always, it's like the same shit, different day. SSDD, it's like that sort of motto, but within the competitive setting, everything's changed. You have bans and protects now, the pick ban system. Completely mind-blowing to some players who can't now use their favorite guns on this favorite map. Back in Black Ops 2, I have 10 class sets. I'd make one class set, so I'd make 5 classes for each map that I'm playing. So if I'm playing Express S&D, got 5 classes right there. If I'm playing Yemen Hardpoint, I got 5 classes right there. And that would be so helpful, because I wouldn't have to keep making classes and changing the things that I did. But with the Bans Protect system, all your classes could change like that, just by the snap of a finger. Someone bans your favorite AR, someone bans your favorite SMG, the most viable in that map. Guess what you have to do now? Either you protect something else, or you try to, push out another strategy that your team's adopted and try to, play in maps, or you're kind of screwed and you lose the map horrifically. And we saw some of those types of games at the Totino's event. Obviously, there weren't many games played due to the single elimination best of 3 format up until the grand finals, but there was so much involved in Black Ops 3 that's different from the past Call of Duties that it's almost impossible to understand what's going on in the mind of the pros if you're not at that high level, even if you're not even a top 1% player. And that's not, being demeaning to any of you guys or any people that are watching the video. It's just the sheer fact that there's some players that are better than other players that will grasp things faster, but there's still a learning curve that everyone's trying to run. It's a race. It's an arms race at the beginning, and what they're racing towards isn't really skill. It's not like, okay, people master movement pretty easily, but it's about information. It's how to use that skill in the most effective manner to develop a meta and figure out what's strong, what the best strategies are to implement. So that's what happens at the beginning of every Call of Duty. Now, I've talked about Black Ops 3 in very general terms. I haven't even touched on the tournament, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about that initially, is because there's so many elements that are going into this tournament initially. It's the first tournament of the season for the pros. It's obviously an invitational, so a lot of the AMs, they can be flown out to Columbus and actually attend this event, so we don't get to see the full breadth of what the whole Call of Duty competitive community thinks about Black Ops 3, the way it should be played. Maybe some teams from the open bracket would demolish any of the top 8 teams that were at this event, but that's not to say that the pro teams are bad. It's just the meta is still developing, guys. So one of the other reasons, obviously the new game coming off an Advanced Warfare meta into a new meta with bans and protects. Game is still being patched, guys. So we saw hotfixes coming in from Vonderhaar. We saw him tweet like, "Oh, we nerfed some guns, so the XR is nerfed. We buffed other guns like the M8, the Man of War. Some things are being changed and flushed out. The Locust got a buff." So as well as people trying to understand what the good things are in the game, things are also changing within the environment that people are trying to learn about. So there's constant moving elements and people just trying to discover and move at such a fast pace in terms of putting information in their own heads and understanding the best way to win, that at this point nothing's going to be perfect. Strategies aren't going to look, tremendously flushed out. We saw in the CTF games that were played at Totino's, guys, horrific. I think even the pros had to agree. They look, after the event, a lot of pros put polls on Twitter like, what do you want, uplink or CTF? And the community was split because people really don't want to play more uplink because it reminds them of Advanced Warfare, but people don't want to see CTF because it was played so horribly, even at a pro level, which is supposed to be the highest level of competition. So even the guys at the top are struggling with the new game mode because of the way the maps are, people didn't scrim those. There's not enough time in the game yet. So the game modes themselves can look really bad if things aren't, put into practice. That's why this event, in my opinion, if it's going to be an invitational, should have been done a little later, because teams are still, coming together. Like, rosters haven't even scrimmed certain maps, game modes even. Everything in that tournament just doesn't bode well for me. It's like you can take these results with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, FaZe Clan got 2-0 by Team Caliber, a team that shit the bed in all of Advanced Warfare in my eyes. You had a couple good games and series against teams like Optic Gaming, but other than that, there was nothing really stand out about them. They never really clutched up when you needed to place top 2, top 4, even top 8 occasionally at events. So inconsistency breeds more inconsistency, and when the game itself has a lot of different elements that people aren't completely familiar with, there's going to be that level of inconsistency in terms of the play that they're doing and they're showing at the tournament itself, and then in terms of the placings that they ended up finishing with after the events of the tournament. So obviously all those factors coming into play. CTF again, a shit show. So maybe if you guys are players yourselves, try to understand the CTF game mode, crush pros in it, because no one understands how to play it right now. It was awful watching Stronghold CTF, my god. Teams camping, trying to figure out where they're spawning, and then 1v4ing in the back, and then trying to push 3v1. One guy's just randomly roaming in the middle with a Weevil. It was awful, man. The Weevil guy. Shout out to you, man. That was awesome. I've never seen someone so hyped about a gun in Call of Duty in my entire life. So, that being said, one of the best ways for a team to actually push themselves through the woodwork, and I said this even before Black Ops 3 came out, was innovation. And an example of innovation is Rise Nation at this tournament. You saw Octane, the MVP player at this tournament, using the ICR, a gun that really no AR player thought was going to be viable at LAN events. They thought it was mainly going to be the XR, the M8A7, the Man of War, guns that had this high instant burst damage or had consistent firepower. ICR wasn't really considered that. It was sort of a middling AR, even to the bottom tier. But when Octane brought that out, played magnificently, had terrific positioning, played the map beautifully, he was able to abuse this gun, forcing players like Formal and Crimsix to use it themselves. He won a map on versus Optic Gaming in the hardpoint. That's a game mode that, looking at Optic Gaming's roster, based on their raw slaying power, should be able to completely dominate any team within the tournament. I mean, that's questionable now, and even questionable beforehand, because the tournament is pretty stacked in terms of rosters. We'll talk about that a little later. But honestly, guys, it's a ridiculous showing out of Rise Nation because of the innovation they brought. If they had won that first map, maybe the series goes into Optic Gaming's favor, because all it took was one round to force Rise Nation to winning the event. They won in round 11. It was a close series nonetheless, but let's say Optic Gaming, they don't have to deal with the ICR, they don't have to deal with this innovation, they don't have a strategy that combats whatever they're being thrown at, then they have a better chance. But because Rise Nation was able to use innovation, they were actually able to crush the competition in a way. And that's one of the things I was talking about with the arms race. They were the first team, and Octane specifically, the first player to understand the capabilities of the ICR. So it's sort of things like that that make me think that this event isn't totally, even, because teams don't have the even information. Like, you can tell at the beginning of Advanced Warfare how different how the pros played the game towards the end of the game, how different those playstyles were. Obviously, there were patches, implemented by the developers for spawns or guns. So there's obviously shifts in the environment itself, but there was also shifts in the way players interacted with that environment from the beginning to the end, right? So these teams will continue to develop, and in this tournament we saw the team who developed the fastest, which was Rise Nation. So talking about that as itself, I listed off all the general reasons. I want to talk about the actual rosters themselves going into this event, because obviously it's a new game, so there's going to be a lot of new elements. But these rosters themselves, because I talked about the parity between Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3, have a lot of experience within this Call of Duty. Obviously, there's differences in movement and maps and potentially game modes and understanding of the Band to Protect system. So all these elements are different, but even still there's experience that can be shown, that can be brought forward. If you have the teamwork, maybe you have a very good chance at coming out through the tournament, even if you don't have much game experience. So going down alphabetically, we had Complexity Gaming, roster of Nameless, Ricky, Parasite, Miracles, 2 world champions from Black Ops 2, Parasite, Miracles. Ricky, Nameless, Parasite, they won on a team on a Unite, I believe, with Saints. They beat Complexity at PAX, so obviously this team has had, since these players have had some success on Black Ops 2, they have a lot of chemistry. This was a team that had a very good shot at making a run to the finals. Obviously all the teams are stacked, which is why I'm saying basically everyone had a chance. I mean, it's only a best of 3, right? So if you have to win 2 games, you can do that, right? You win a respawn, clinch the S&D, there you go. The next team on the list, FaZe Clan, Clayster, Enable, Zoom, Attach. This was the team that continually rivaled Optic Gaming in the grand finals throughout the season of Advanced Warfare. This should have been a team that should have gone to the grand finals in many posters' eyes, the viewers who were watching. I remember seeing the comments when they got eliminated by TK, like they're falling off, the collapse of FaZe, they need to disband the roster. It's a best of 3 in a single elimination tournament nonetheless. They didn't have a chance to make a loser bracket run. We couldn't even see more than 2 games from FaZe. 2. Keep that in mind. So FaZe Clan, another top dog for this tournament, then ended up clutching up within those games. And even still, the games were close. Like all these games between the teams that were played were relatively close. Maybe it's due to the fact that they're all relatively on the same learning curve. Everyone's trying to learn at the same pace, and they're all just bouncing ideas off each other. So the knowledge of the game that they have is based off what they've done. But besides that, there's still other elements coming in. So let's talk about the next team on the list, Luminosity Gaming. This is a roster of Replays, Proofy, Spacely, and John. Another solid roster coming off of Black Ops 2. Evil John, man, this guy was considered one of the best SMG slayers in the game when he was on SB as well. Ridiculous player. Spacely, another top S&D OBJ type player that was always a wild card, always seemed to function outside of the team structure. Proofy, a player that placed second place at COD Champs in Black Ops 2. One of the highlight reels of Black Ops 2, of all of the Black Ops 2, is him going off on Raid Hardpoint. We saw and we know that this guy has great potential. Obviously, he slumped a little bit in the more recent Call of Duties, but that's no fault of Proofy. Just the competition is stiffening up around him, and so everything the Luminosity Gaming has to offer this may have been the one team that didn't really have a chance of making it, but I'll still give him a far out chance, because if they beat Rise Nation in the first round and they beat TK in the second round, if that's what it came down to, very good chance of making it to the finals, where you could game 5 round 11 Optic Gaming like that. So that being said, solid roster in Luminosity Gaming. The next roster on the list, Optic Gaming, Scump, Formal, Crim6 Karma, almost non-explanatory. These guys have been so dominant for so long in Advanced Warfare, and even still, they're making it to grand finals. This team always has the potential and always has shown up. They beat Elevate, they beat Complexity, and they only lost to Rise round 11. They had a hard run, relatively speaking, and they were still able to persevere through the most of it and just barely lose. So top squad in Optic Gaming, another team that definitely could have won the tournament. Rise Nation obviously did win the tournament. They had the potential, and they showed that potential. Their roster of Slacked, Classic, Octane, and Looney. Obviously, Slacked, God Slayer from Black Ops 2 and on Unite. He was a young gun back then, so couldn't compete in these big tournaments now like COD Champs, but he was on Unite with Clayster. That was one of his breakout performances, placing second, only losing to Farico Impact, the dominant squad at the very beginning of Black Ops 2. Octane, the MVP of this tournament, but that's post the tournament. Octane was still a dominant AW player in terms of his AR prowess, coming out of the woodworks and showing up. Looney, another player coming out of the woodworks through the more recent Call of Duties and showing up and doing what he had to do, really. Rise Nation, they had a chance. They had looked good, this roster on paper. Even have Classic, a guy who's really, this is a weird type of, this guy is weird. I don't know. I feel like people underrepresent him, but people always say that other people underrepresent him, but they always consider him like, he's like a sleeper threat, but everyone knows that he's a sleeper threat. And, at this event, he showed that he was a super dominant XR player. He could burst you from across the map and slay in that regard. So I feel like he's not inconsistent. He's consistently sleeping, but he has like a potency to him. I'll have to make a video on him later. I'll like look through his career and see what's up with him. But Rise Nation, a potent roster, ended up winning this event, so they had the potential. Team Elevate, Aqua Facenta, Remy Nagafen, this was the Team Revenge squad that took second at COD Championships in Advanced Warfare, a team with incredible teamwork. This team, even after they split up, all went to very solid rosters, and they had their own individual performances and showed how good they were individually, and they're all coming back together again. The only outlier really was Facenta, who got on Orbit, and they didn't do too well, but other than that, you have a really solid roster. These guys have a lot of chemistry. They had a good chance of making a run, especially early on in the stages of the Totino's event, because if you, let's say, beat Optic Gaming in a best of 3, which is, come on, I can beat Optic Gaming in a best of 3 if we flip the coin 150 times. So you put a team that's good enough, like Team Elevate, in those shoes, they can easily beat either Complexity or Envy after that, and then make their run into the grand finals. I mean, all these teams had a chance. Next on the list, Team Envious. JCap, again, top 2 finish Black Ops 2 COD champs. Slasher, a dominant AW player, really became a sleeper towards the end, but still never really shit the bed in my eyes. He always was a consistent guy. And then you have Aches and TP, the duo from Black Ops 2, of all of Black Ops 2. This was the Complexity duo that kept the whole thing together. They crushed it after Freako Impact fell. They crushed it throughout the duration of Black Ops 2, and then they carried it on into Ghost. So they have this chemistry. They have, the previous, how do I want to call it? They have it in their resume that they can actually transition from one Call of Duty to the next. Obviously, they had similar rosters coming from Clayster to Karma. That was the only real difference, and this is a bigger difference on Envious, but they still have that veteranship that, has a very good chance at doing well in a tournament like this. Obviously, they didn't do well. They only lost in the first round, but it's the best of 3, guys. But I'm not even going to talk about the fact that this was a single elimination best of 3, which is a shitty format, by the way. But that's still what they have to deal with, and they only ended up losing in Game 3. So it's not like this team's doing bad in regards to what the environment's like. It's just a shitty situation in terms of everything going around. All of these teams are top squads anyways, so we're going to see how well they do throughout the course of the season. It's just this event shouldn't be used as a massive benchmark for anything too special in the eyes of the analysts, in my eyes. Final team, Team Caliber, Sharp, Neslo, Theory, Goonchar. Basically the same roster coming out of Black Ops 2 for these guys, consistently placed top 4 throughout the existence of their roster. Always a team that no one looked at them individually, and that's always their sort of gimmick, is that they don't stand out by themselves. And really, Theory is the only hard carry of the team, at least at that tournament, but they only really struggle when it comes to individual play. But when they come together, perfect. It just goes together like, 2 peas in a pod. I didn't say 2 pods in a pea. I remember making that mistake in a conversation I had with a friend. Horrible mistake. I don't even know what happened right there. It was so bad. But anyways, Team TK, another team that, with their teamwork, like Team Elevate, have a huge chance at making a run. And obviously they beat FaZe 2-0, so that right there, if they beat FaZe 2-0, I would have thought they beat Rise, but they only ended up winning 1 map. In ridiculous fashion, by the way. They only won by 1 point. 250 to 249. I love the new hardpoint, by the way, just so you know. Great format they've got for that. But TK, they also had a chance at making it to the grand finals and potentially pulling an upset over Optic Gaming, because they always have close series. All these 8 teams had a chance of winning. One team did. That was the permutation of the event that we saw. How many other permutations of the event we could have seen? I think we could have seen 7 other permutations in terms of who came out winner of the grand finals. Obviously, there's a lot more permutations when you multiply times by 2, do the power to the 4, whatever. I don't take probability, guys, but anything was possible at this event due to all the factors that are layered and stacked upon each other. New game, new system, and bans and protects, new maps. People don't have the experience yet with all the guns. Still, people don't even know what the rule sets are online. People are playing different things in terms of the S&Ds, in terms of UMGs, MLGs. So much is different, guys, that if someone honestly tells you that Rise Nation is the best team in the game, you could tell them to just I think over their lives. Like, go into like a holy river or something, like drench yourself of sin, try to figure out where you went wrong in your life to make such a false and incorrect statement that Rise Nation is the best team in the game, because I think any of these teams, if they had won the tournament, would be in the same exact position as Rise Nation. And obviously people aren't saying Rise Nation is the best team in the game, at least in large numbers, because people also, who are smart people, understand that yes, this was a single elimination tournament with a best of 3 format up until the grand finals. which is only a best of 5, not even double, best of 5, not even best of 7. Rational people understand that this event won't mean too much at the end of the day. If, let's say, a team like Luminosity Gaming goes on through the rest of the season and wins every event, no one's going to look at this event and say, wow, they really improved from the first event where they only placed top 8. It doesn't matter what they placed at this event because there was nothing to prove. The sample size is so small based on the number of teams here, the number of games played, the experience that all the teams had on this game, so the competition isn't even that high among the top 8 teams that were invited to this invitational. I feel like I've been ranting for too long, but in my eyes, this event, it can't be looked at too seriously. It's just an exhibition event in my eyes. Top teams went. Obviously, we get to see for the first time what it's like to see Black Ops 3 at LAN, and it's fun to watch, guys. Not if you're playing CTF with no knowledge of the game, not if you're playing Uplink with ridiculous game sense of throwing the ball or camping in the back with it and making the game as painful to watch as the viewer for the viewer as possible. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please leave a like down below. It's been Nuxter. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.